Human society is complex. It is complicated. It is beautiful, and it is dynamic. It is a solid entity made from a variety of interconnected parts that flow together and cooperate, simultaneously building and negotiating a fluid and ever-changing structure. Each society has evolved from a simple starting point, expanding and complicating as it develops more functions and necessities. The polis, as defined by Aristotle, started with a single human and gradually complicated to a relationship between man and woman, then a family, then a village, all the way to the point of a large, overarching society ruled by its body of rational and cooperative citizens. If we return to the smallest unit of the polis, we arrive back at the human, who is constructed in a very similar way. His body is the sum of his parts, all working equally to create a rational and functioning being. He is an aggregate of organ systems, comprised of specialized tissues, which are in turn made from individual and specific cells. Just as man is the smallest contributing part of society, cells are the smallest contributing unit of man. If we look closely at these cells, we see that they are crafted much like human society, which leads one to the conclusion that society must follow a very natural progression. Each social actor has a specific role in society, making particular contributions and gaining certain rewards as a result. Once the dependence on these roles has developed in a society, there is often no turning back, and without just one of these roles, the social order would collapse due to the lack of an integral part of its structure and function. This applies to all walks of life, from the president of our country to Joe the plumber. No matter how seemingly insignificant the role or the actor, it has been placed into our society and maintained its position because of its necessity to the upkeep of our lives. Imagine our society without plumbers. We would have no toilets, no showers, no running water, and we would be helpless. Higher functions of economy and government would suffer with the lack of this essential aspect of our society. As Kevin Kelly explains in his TED Talk description of the technium, because our society has developed to such a point, it is very unlikely that we will reverse in complexity and not require this particular role. The same idea applies to the cells of our bodies. Within our cells are smaller actors called organelles that each perform a role both finite and fundamental for the survival of our cells. The lysosomes digest the food that the cell uses for fuel. The mitochondria makes the cell's energy. The ribosomes form proteins that make up the physical characteristics of the cell, and the list goes on. If a cell lacks a lysosome, it will die. No other organelle can fill the role of the lysosome, as it is unique and essential to the cell's life cycle. The function of each society is based upon the functions of its actors and the relative proportions and concentrations of their roles. A society with a large number of soldiers is bound to be a warring society. Conversely, a warring society requires a large number of soldiers. In Sparta, every free man between the ages of 20 and 60 was kept in the active reserve, as Sparta valued conquest of surrounding nations over many other values possible for a society. As Sparta expanded its territory, it also expanded its need for soldiers to protect that territory, consequently falling to other powers when unable to maintain a large enough soldier-to-helot ratio. A muscle cell has the role of moving the body, so it requires a great deal of ATP, the molecule providing the energy to send muscle signals. On account of this necessity, muscle cells have many more mitochondria than a typical body cell, as mitochondria are the ATP-producing organelle in each cell. As a body increases its muscle mass, that body's muscle cells require more ATP, and more mitochondria are thus produced. This occurs because cells are self-regulating. Each cell maintains a certain degree of homeostasis due to the checks and balances built into its genomic structure. Sound familiar? If a cell strays from its ideal function due to a hiccup in its DNA or an infection by a virus, it is programmed to self-terminate, a process called apoptosis. Similarly, society tends to expel its members that do not contribute, placing them in institutions to assure that their ideas and practices do not metastasize. So, society is naturally occurring, just like a cell. Both organisms and society aspire to become increasingly complex. From such increasing complexity comes the dissection of duties, and therefore the impossibility of self-sufficiency and the inevitability of interdependence. Things not in accordance with the natural order are eliminated. This concept is not novel. The organicists of the early 20th century proposed a very similar model for society, using the cells that make up organisms to develop a strong notion of society as a concrete entity that was part of a natural and physical world. This theory fell out of favor as certain aspects of cellular versus social interaction were questioned, and as science came under attack. However, their model looked at cells as social actors and organisms as societies, rather than the more microscopic view of cells as societies and organelles as its members. In addition, recent scientific discoveries have proven cells to be more fluid in their communication, just as societies can exchange actors and ideas. Microbiologists have observed that cells can exchange proteins, nutrients, and even genetic information through protein channels in their membranes, just as an actor may cross the borders between societies. As both cellular biology and human interaction are further studied and understood, the similarities between cells and civilizations are further extended. With such apparent ties, how can a scientifically thinking sociologist question the nature of organic society?